Telling stories has been ingrained in our culture for years and years, decades and decades, millenniums, since the beginning. From cave paintings, stone carvings, to literature and film, there have been countless ways that human beings have tried to tell their stories, be them true or make-believe, and share them down through generations. I feel like it's an important part of simply being human. We feel such an array of emotions and we go through so many great and hard situations that it's quite difficult to show others exactly what is going on inside. So the best way to do that is to simply tell it in a story. Listening to great stories help us empathize with others, and they're also a great source of entertainment. They help us understand the worlds that came before we were born and get to know not only ourselves but each other better. So when it comes to visual storytelling, the first thing that will come into people's heads is probably films. Films have been around for a long time now as a brilliant source of entertainment, as a way of taking stories from the artistic paper format to something that's actually a moving image in front of you, the closest thing to real life. However, now there's also games, and I want to talk about views on games being able to tell stories as well as films, and what differences there are between the two mediums. Now, the main difference between games and films when telling a narrative through their platform is that a film director has a vision. They know how they want to tell their story from start to finish. They know how they want the audience to perceive the story. Sometimes there are cliffhangers and things like that. However, games are entirely different. Games need to be driven and manipulated by the audience, by the player, for the story to unravel. And most of the time, that story can change due to the player's actions. I feel like games now have become such a natural part of our culture. A couple of decades ago, games were nowhere near to the peak that they are nowadays. If you heard the word game back then, and perhaps to some people now it still means simply a game that is for entertainment value. Something that you do that has a leveling up system, probably involves some shooting, probably involves something a little bit vulgar, and that's what games were seen as. However, there is such a wide array of games now that I think it's quite difficult to find someone who doesn't play games. The question, do you play games now, seems so trivial. It seems just as silly to say that to someone as it does to say, do you watch films? Because of course, we all watch films. Who doesn't like to sit down and watch a good movie every now and then? And it's becoming the same with games. As games have rapidly developed through the past couple of decades, they have branched out to other devices and also other types of games, other genres. Now, the main question, if you want to understand someone's taste in film and narrative, would be, what sort of genre do you like to watch? And I believe that's the same for gaming. Do you like role-playing games? Do you like first-person shooters? Do you like indie games? I guess a good question would be, why do we watch films in the first place? Why do we want to get immersed in a whole new narrative, a whole new story? The most obvious answer to that question is escapism. Some time out from the real world, from the world that we know, and getting lost in someone else's vision of what the world could be. Alternate worlds and imagination that simply doesn't exist in the world around you right now. Films can help you shut off. They can help you regain your strength when you're feeling low, and also they can help educate you. Many people do see games as inferior to film, and I guess it's because it's a newer platform, a newer medium, and not as many people understand it as well as they do film. A film critic called Roger Ebert basically said that games were inferior to film. That is what he said. He stated that video games were a loss of precious hours that we have to become more civilized, empathetic and well-cultured. Now, we understand where he's getting at. There are many films that help us to understand the mistakes possibly that humankind has made in the past, such as Schindler's List. Many very moving pieces. But who's to say that games haven't done the same and aren't capable of doing the same? Many people see games as simply just a source of entertainment, but they can be so much more. And when you think about empathy, I can't think of a better way to provoke empathy from someone than to really put them immersed in a narrative and have them the center of the interaction between what happens throughout that narrative. Putting the control in their hands makes them feel more at one with the story that's being told to them. They have the power, they have the control, they are the driving force, therefore everything that happens is because of them. How can they not feel empathy because of that? Games such as Killbox, which was made to open people's eyes about using drones in the war. It's a very interesting game because it might not be necessarily what you think of when you think of games, but it's still got the same mechanics. It's a multiplayer, and one person plays running around in the scenery and another person is controlling a drone and trying to kill certain targets. And more often than not, they end up killing the other person who is running around doing nothing on the floor. This might seem like maybe a boring game perhaps, but it really opened people's eyes to realize that when you are controlling these drones, you have no idea what you're killing on the floor. And their partner, the other person who was playing, they didn't know what was coming and they died. So that's a very tough topic, sorry, but I just wanted to show you that games can be used for something much more than simply just sitting down and having fun. And for Roger Ebert to say that games don't make us more civilized, more empathetic, when you think of a game such as Killbox, I would say it's quite the opposite. Now, as well as these games that were obviously designed to provoke a certain nature, there are much bigger titles. Games that are being told as series, kind of taking the twist from television and making it more interactive and immersive, such as Telltale Games series or Life is Strange. You can see plenty of videos on YouTube alone of people getting very emotional and actually crying over the decisions that were presented to them within those games. I know I was beating myself up because I really didn't want certain characters to die and things like that, because you feel like you are one with the game. And you have a part. If you don't pick up that controller and make those tough decisions and carry on playing, the narrative stops, the story ends there. And that's all down to you. That's a good or a bad thing, because with a film, the narrative goes on no matter whether you want it to or not. I guess you can turn off the TV, but you don't have to physically do anything. You can just sit there and enjoy it. But with a game, you have to be the driving force. In my mind, that makes the message more powerful. As well as the emotions that these sorts of games provoke, I think they also have quite an interesting future ahead of them. At the end of these games, you get to see what choices you had made in comparison to everyone else that has played the game. And I don't mean in your circle of friends, I mean in the world. You get to see percentages of whether you were within the majority of people or the minority, and that is so interesting because you're not only learning about yourself and how you might deal with tough situations, you're learning about how mankind deals with tough situations. And by tough situations, I'm talking euthanasia, close people's deaths, trying to help someone with suicide. These games have touched on very dark matters, but because they're games, they can get away with it. Because even though they feel real to an extent, they will always be a game. And yes, this might seem like they're not as good as films, because films can make themselves look so real. But when you are in a game and you're actually within the narrative, you're there, you're feeling it, you're making the big decisions, you still need that detachment, or that emotion could perhaps get a bit too much. In the future, using these sorts of percentages to see how people react to certain situations can be used on a larger scale. I'm not too sure what exactly, but I just find that using these games in these really big situations to find out how human beings feel on certain topics that perhaps they wouldn't talk about in their day-to-day life, or they wouldn't really understand because they've never been through it, could be really good research somewhere down the line. It's interesting to see as well the array of interactive films. Films using things like WebGL or Interlude, where they're mashing together loads of different video files and crossing them over depending on what the viewer wants to see. It seems like they're kind of going down the interactive route of gaming. I've also seen films using WebGL to make interactive charts and things like that over videos, which I think is really interesting because they could put a real-time chart in, say, a documentary, and it would always be relevant. It would never have to be updated, and the data there would always be correct at whatever time you're watching the video. So it's very interesting how these interactive elements can be used through both film and gaming. And I'm always so excited because I can slowly see them merging. For instance, game designers have already seemed to want to try and go down the route of film. Ken Levine, for instance, who was the mastermind behind BioShock and BioShock Infinite, I freaking love BioShock. He is working on an interactive film series using Interlude, all about the Twilight Zone, and I'm very interested to see where he goes with that. And it's just very exciting to see that he's thinking outside of the gaming environment. He wants to make another game as well, however he wants to try and make this film series but keep an interactive element in it because that's what comes from the gaming universe. As well as that, there's people like Hideo Kojima, who was the mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid, and he came from a film background. He didn't come from a game one. He had always loved films, and even though he might have been ridiculed at the start of his career, this film knowledge brought in a new way of thinking about gaming, such as in Metal Gear Solid when he made you battle Psycho Mantis, and Psycho Mantis read your memory card and knew what game you were playing and made you remove your controller from port 1 to port 2 to actually beat him. That narrative physically left your screen and made you get up off your couch or your bed and physically do something, and that is amazing. And also right now, Hideo Kojima is working with Guillermo del Toro, which is amazing. It's mashing up an awesome film director with a great game designer, and I can't wait for Death Stranding. It's going to be great. They've already made such beautiful game trailers, and PT was a masterpiece in itself anyway. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that film and games should gladly merge. And I think they are, which is amazing, but it's irritating how they're seen as two completely different platforms when they're both giving the same things. Film seems to have more direction. They have more precise control by their directors. However, games have this innate ability to really put the viewer in these fictional worlds and within these narratives to make them feel emotions like they've never felt before. Why not merge the two? I believe if you stick to one medium and you specialize too much, you start to not be able to think outside the box. People like Hideo Kojima and what Ken Levine's doing, they are able to think outside the box because they're getting their inspiration from other sources that aren't just within their own industries. And that's what needs to be done to push the boundaries of narrative and storytelling to make something entirely new. So I believe that instead of thinking which one's better, we should just be thinking, what are the best parts of both and how can we merge them together to make something truly unique and really empowering to whoever watches it? Because yes, film and games could be mainly for entertainment, but they can also be really eye-opening. They can help us escape from our worries, or they can help us understand the worries of others and worldly matters that are going on and relevant right now. When you play a game or watch a film, it's much easier to take in information and it lingers with you afterwards. So I do believe that it's important to take these platforms seriously. Both of them, not just one, and try and make them better. So anyway, that is my opinion on the gaming and the filming industry when thinking about narrative and storytelling. It's a very important topic to me and I really hope I got it across okay, but this is exactly why I am studying games development, even though I am a massive lover of film and always have been. And I really hope that I can just work in an industry that is working towards using the best of both of these mediums to push the boundaries of storytelling. Have fun with it, but also make the best impact that we can on the youths and the world. Enough, cheese. The future is coming. film and game mashups, and I'm freaking excited. Thanks for listening to me ramble about my love of games and films. I hope this was moderately interesting to listen to. If you have any of your own thoughts on this, please do write them in the comment section below, and have a lovely day or evening. Bye!